Okay, let's get going on a team analysis for Strat-O-Matic for the 1984 Chicago Cubs, the 96 win Chicago Cub team that won the National League East that year, lost to the Padres in the NLCS, and played with this team a couple of times in the past. I did a video on them. I matched them up against the 1983 White Sox. I got that video posted and also played with them for a little bit in my National League tournament. So let's get right into it with the 1984 Cubs. Let's start at the top of the order. As always, we look at the 1-2 hitters and their on base chances. You got Bob Dunier and Ryan Sandberg set in stone as the 1-2 hitters. You see their on base chances right there. I'm also going to show you Ryan Sandberg's hits with multiple base advancement. You can see that is a really solid production out of a number two hitter. Keep in mind, this was Ryan Sandberg's MVP season of 1984, and it really is a really solid Stratomatic card. And it's even a guy who I would say, if you're sitting down to play with the 84 Cubs, you could play around the lineup a little bit. And if you choose, you could get away with hitting a guy like Sandberg third in the lineup if you want to. Very versatile player. It's a good guy to have on your team. Now, let's go through the numbers that we get out of the middle of the order. First, I'm going to show you Gary Matthews's numbers. You see his numbers right there with hits with multiple base advancement. You can see those numbers are a little bit low for a number three hitter. They could both go up to about 6 or 7, depending on ballpark effect hits. But I would say Gary Matthews' game is really more based on getting on base, hitting out of that three hole, because now I'm going to show you his on base chance numbers. And you can see those are really excellent numbers. So if you go by the Stratomatic book, Gary Matthews was set in stone, left field, batting third in the lineup. But if you play with the 84 Cubs, you could play around their lineup a little bit and maybe move Matthews up in the order because he is so good at getting on base. Now I'm going to show you the cleanup hitter, Leon Durham. He hit cleanup against righties, and according to the Stratomatic book, he hits seventh in the lineup against lefties. So I'm going to show you his numbers against right-handed pitching, his hits with multiple base advancement. You see that number right there. That's a very good number. Now I'm going to show you the right fielder, Keith Moreland. He was basically the cleanup hitter against lefties, and he hits fifth right behind Leon Durham against righties. So let's take a look at Keith Moreland's hits with multiple base advancement. Those numbers are pretty good. Now we see Jody Davis's numbers. You got those numbers there out of your catcher. And next, we're going to take a look at Ron Say's numbers against left-handed pitching. So you could see none of those numbers really jump out at you as really being what you would call very good to excellent. What I do like about the Cub offense is that you do have pretty good bang for your buck as you get to like sixth or seventh in the order. What I don't like about the offense is that it is a little too tilted towards the right-handed side of the plate, where really the only real impact left-handed hitter is Leon Durham, and he obviously drops in the lineup when you face left-handed pitching. So as we look at the 1984 Cubs offense, I basically gave them threes all across the board. Nothing really jumps out at this offense as really being a whole heck of a lot better than just being above average. It doesn't mean I don't think it's a good offense. I do think it's a good offense. However, a lot of it is depending upon ballpark you're playing in, the pitcher you're facing. These cards on the 1984 Cubs are not exactly what you would call, okay, if I roll these guys' cards, I'm good to go. None of these cards are really great over the top cards. So overall, I think the 84 Cubs offense is just above average. I give them a 3 out of 5. Now let's take a look at the Chicago Cubs defensively. As always, I'll start right up the middle with the second base shortstop. These are excellent numbers, especially out of Ryan Sandberg. You don't get any better than that at second base. And I'd actually forgotten until just now when I sat down to go through the cards that Ryan Sandberg had such a low E rating from 1984. That's just, you don't see that very often. And Larry Boa is a three at shortstop. So I'm not crazy about a three, but you could get away with it, especially considering the fact that Boa has a very manageable E rating. So I could not give the Cubs middle infield defense a perfect score of a 5 out of 5. And if only Larry Boa was a two, then I would have given them that five score. But the fact that he's a three, that brings down their middle infield defense score down to a 4.25. But that is still a very, very good rating for middle infield defense. I don't give out a lot of middle infield defensive ratings above a four. So that's a very, very good score. Now let's take a look at the outfield defense. This is not very good out here. Obviously, you're really good in center field with Bob Denier, but you are carrying two fours in the outfield, which you really don't want out of your corner outfielders. So I settled on a score of a 2.3 out of 5 for the Cubbies outfield defense. Now, here's some good news on the 84 Cubs defense, following up on the outfield defense. As I look at the overall E ratings on this team, the E rating, I gave them a perfect score of a 5 out of 5 because I really, really like the E ratings you get on this defense. You got second base, shortstop, center field. You see those E ratings right there. Those are excellent numbers. Yes, you got Keith Moreland in right field, who's a four, but he's got a very solid E rating. I'm not crazy about Gary Matthews' E rating. However, let's take a look at the third baseman, Ron Say. Yeah, he's a four, but that is an excellent E rating at third base. And once again, anyone who's ever played Strat-O-Matic would know third base has a very high split. I did kind of think about it for a couple of minutes, and I decided to give the 84 Cubs a 5 out of 5 on the E rating score. And a lot of that is driven by the fact that they are so solid up the middle, and I do like the E rating at third base. So their overall defensive score came out at a 3.85, which is a very, very good score. And it would have been even better had they not been carrying two fours in the outfield. Now let's go through the Cubs starting rotation. Let's get started with the ace, Rick Sutcliffe. You see his on base chances numbers right there. It is obviously a legit ace card out of Rick Sutcliffe. Remember, that was the year he went 16-1 after he joined the Chicago Cubs from the Cleveland Indians that year. However, I can't give him a perfect score of a 5 out of 5, but I did settle on a excellent score of a 4.5 out of 5. Now let's take a look at the starting rotation depth on the 84 Cubs. I'm going to show you Dennis Eckersley, Steve Trout, and Scott Sanderson. You see all of their on base chance numbers right there. One thing which I really do like about this Cubs starting rotation is number one, a lot of it is driven by Dennis Eckersley, the number two starter. Very, very solid card for Dennis Eckersley in 1984. And then when I look at Steve Trout's card and Scott Sanderson's card, what I like about Steve Trout and also what I like about Scott Sanderson is that both of them are really good at keeping the ball in the ballpark. So that is a nice thing to have in your rotation. So as I looked at their overall numbers, and I look at the starting rotation depth, I graded them out at a 4.5 out of 5. So the 84 Cubs starting rotation, overall rotation grades out at a 4.5 out of 5. Now, I know that may seem high, but I really like this starting rotation. And yes, a lot of it is driven by Dennis Eckersley as the number two guy, but you do get good bang for your buck out of your three and four starters on this team with Steve Trout and Scott Sanderson. So that's my grade on the 1984 Cubs starting rotation. Now let's take a look at the bullpen. First, let's show you the closer, Lee Smith. You see, those are good numbers out of your closer for on base chances. What I'm not crazy about with Lee Smith is that there are some power opportunities there on his card against right-handed batting, and that's something that you really don't want out of your bullpen. So I settled on a score of a 4 out of 5 for Lee Smith, and really what saved his score was that he does have pretty stingy numbers as far as getting on base. But again, what I don't like is the fact that he does have some power opportunities when he faced right-handed batting. Now let's take a look at the bullpen depth. Let me show you the numbers for Tim Stoddard, George Frazier, and Rich Bordy. You see all those numbers right there. You got to remember Tim Stoddard was a little bit later in his career by the time 1984 came around, so not particularly crazy about his card from that year. You do have pretty solid cards out of George Frazier and Rich Bordy, but much like what I spoke about earlier with Lee Smith, what I'm not crazy about Rich Bordy is he has the same issue as Lee Smith, where there are some power chances on his card when he faces right-handed batting. Plus, this team really did not have a lefty to come out of a bullpen, so you could do a little bit of mixing and matching. So for me, that's not a make or break issue. But it is nice when you do have a viable lefty option to come out of the bullpen. So the bullpen depth, I would say it is above average on the 1984 Cubs, but I wouldn't go any higher than that. So I give them a bullpen depth score of a 3.5 out of 5. So the bullpen grades out at a 3.75 out of 5. So as we look at the 1984 Cubs as a whole, they grade out at a 3.8 out of 5, which is about where I figured they would be. I remember kind of saying to myself, this is definitely a team that will score above a 3.5, but I don't think it will get really that close to a 4. But in actuality, they actually came closer to the 4 out of 5 that I thought they would. And really what drove that score up for me was, and again, it had been a little bit of a while since I played with the 84 Cubs, was that I kind of forgot how good the E ratings are on this team, especially up the middle with second base, shortstop, and center field. So once again, that's my grade on the 1984 Chicago Cubs. They grade out at a 3.8 out of 5. I thank you all for watching, and my next team breakdown will be on the 1985 St. Louis Cardinals. Have a good day, everyone.